off to Korea, far across the sea. It's the same old story, and it's up to Old Glory to win another fight for liberty.
After the Second World War and the defeat of Japan, the Korean peninsula was split in half at the 38th parallel. The division of Korea after World War II created two halves, the communist North Korea and a democratic South Korea. North Korea was allied with China and the USSR, providing them with military training and supplies. Their leader was a communist World War II veteran and a ranking major in the Soviet Army, Kim Il-sung, who was put in power by the USSR. South Korea, on the other hand, was aligned with the US and its allies, who cared less about the military state of the Koreas. The US had set up their government alongside the pro-Japanese government put in place by Imperial Japan. Most of the government officials who were working alongside US personnel were Japanese loyalists who were put in place by their old occupiers. And in power was placed by the US Syngman Rhee, the president of the Korean Provisional Government in exile. Both governments became dictatorships, and while today North Korea is seen as the more extreme state, in the early years of the war, South Korea's repression was in many ways worse. Rhee's government crushed political opposition, suspected communists, or anyone who was suspected to be against them by arresting, torturing, and executing them. Uprisings like the Jeju Rebellion were put down with extreme brutality. Entire villages were destroyed. The North carried out its own purges and executions too. Neither side was clean, but in the end it was found that 82% of civilian massacres were done by South Korea and the other 18% by the North. Both sides wanted a unified Korea under their rule, but with the United States and the USSR wanting to push their own ideology on the country, they couldn't come to an agreement for unified rule. North Korea kept trying to get the USSR to let them go to war with the South, but were deemed unready. On June 25, 1950, near the city of Kaesong, a military clash occurred between South and North Korea. This prompted Kim Il-sung to ask Stalin for permission once again to declare war on the South, and getting that permission and beginning the war the same day. The South Korean military collapsed almost immediately. Within days, North Korean forces had taken the capital city of Seoul, and it looked like the whole peninsula was about to fall. After the troops MacArthur sent failed to stop the North Korean advances, the US put up a vote to the UN to intervene in the conflict. Since the USSR was boycotting the UN meetings at the time, they weren't there to oppose the decision. The UN sent in troops from Canada, Britain, Australia, and over a dozen other countries, with the majority being US troops. Canada alone sent over 26,000 of their own troops. Things weren't looking good for the South Koreans. They were pushed back all the way to the port city of Busan. The only thing keeping them from handing over the whole peninsula to the North Koreans was American air power hammering North Korean supply lines. Ridgway, commander of the 82nd Airborne Division, who later took over the war, said without it Korea would have fallen in 60 days. On September 15, 1950, an incredible naval invasion around the coastal city of Incheon was orchestrated by MacArthur. This maneuver of sending in 75,000 troops, similar to the invasion of Normandy roughly 6 years prior, cut off North Korean supply lines and forced them to retreat. After pushing the North Korean troops back to the 38th parallel, it seemed like the war was over. America had managed to hold off the communists from expanding, but MacArthur arrogantly persisted to keep going. reassuring Truman's concerns about China joining the war. Saying it will not happen, he was allowed to keep going. After pushing the North Koreans all the way to the Chinese border, they had fallen victim to North Korea's plan. Kim Il-sung had managed to convince China to join the war and help them out by sending in roughly 500,000 Chinese troops to help them. By letting the South push them back all the way to the Chinese border, they had stretched their supply lines thin, and with the Korean winter coming, this was deadly for the South Koreans. After being pushed back to the 38th parallel, MacArthur told Truman to nuke North Korea. On April 11, 1951, MacArthur was fired. He was replaced with General Matthew B. Ridgway. During the period of North Korea's advance, the US was suspected of using biochemical warfare against them. This is heavily debated and still not confirmed to this day, so I'll give you the evidence and let you decide for yourselves. During the Second World War, Japan had used bombs filled with insects containing the bubonic plague, anthrax, typhoon, and other diseases. This technology was pioneered by the infamous Japanese Unit 731. After the Second World War, the US had purchased this knowledge from the unit commanders in exchange for their freedom by not getting them persecuted. The funding for biochemical warfare research and development jumped from $5.3 million in 1950 to $345 million during the period between 1951 and 1953. A report from Australian journalist Wilfred Burchett talks about seeing clusters of flies and fleas on the North Korean snow-covered hillside, and how in one place there was over 1,000 fleas in 1 square meter of snow. He interviewed an old Korean man. The man said he had never seen fleas in the open before. The insects were infested with the bubonic plague. Patrol reported finding clumps of fleas in such density, if you put your foot down, you would kill 100, while previous patrol had seen no insects there. The bubonic plague has never been seen in Korea's history before that. On top of that, 36 captured US pilots confessed in taking part in chemical warfare.
My germination took place on the 27th of March, 1952, and it was a VT germination. Although I never wanted to participate in bacteriological warfare, I guess you might say I was coward enough to go ahead and do as I was told. How can I go back and face my family in a civilized world? How can I tell them these things, that I am a criminal in the eyes of humanity?
After returning to the US, all of the pilots retracted their confessions and were faced with charges of treason. These are just some of the claims. There are many more claims and counterclaims, way too many to discuss right now. What is for certain is that the US is denying all of these claims and deeming the topic of them using biochemical warfare as untrue. After rigorous fighting, the position of both sides became still. Negotiations stretched over a long period of time, since Syngman Rhee refused to accept a peace treaty. In the end, an armistice was signed on July 27, 1953. With that, the war is still ongoing to this day, just without any major conflicts, but the tension is still as strong, if not stronger, as back then. For Americans, Korea became known as the Forgotten War. It sat in an awkward spot happening after World War II and before the controversy of the Vietnam War. President Truman called it a political action. Soldiers came home to almost no recognition. Most Americans today still couldn't tell you much about it. For the Soviets, Korea was never officially their fight, even though they supplied the weapons and secretly had Soviet pilots flying MiG-15s in combat with Chinese markings. Once it became clear neither side could win outright, Stalin pushed towards a ceasefire. For Moscow, it was a diplomatic way to bleed America without starting a nuclear war. For Canadians, Korea was the country's first major Cold War military commitment, and the beginning of Canada's identity as a peacekeeping nation. Over 26,000 Canadians fought under the UN flag, and nearly 7,000 more stayed on after the armistice as peacekeepers. Lester Pearson, Canada's Secretary of State for External Affairs, called the armistice the end of one chapter of bloodshed, but warned it was only the beginning of a harder one. He was right. His work in Korea and later during the Suez Crisis earned him the Nobel Peace Prize in 1957. Canada has had over 125,000 military personnel serve in peacekeeping missions since, and it all traces back to the Korean War. So there you have it, the story of the Korean War, the war that marked the start of the proxy wars between America and the USSR.
So now it's goodbye, Maria. I'm off to Korea, far across the sea. It's the same old story, and it's up to Old Glory to win another fight for liberty. So keep